Right, Jenny Claffey is with us to talk tennis. The full unveiling of new superstars, kind of as we predicted at the start of the tournament. Alcaraz, he the man, and Świątek, she the woman.
Yes, they are definitely the two stars of the future of the tennis game. Exciting to see two new names and big stars winning the title, and quite convincingly winning the title, both of them. We saw obviously Alcaraz had a relatively not easy match against Ruud, but he had much tougher matches in the rounds before that. But we've been talking about him for a while now, and he is going to be the star of the men's game. Świątek, we know a little bit more about. This is her third Grand Slam, so we know that, and she's the world number one, so we know that she has the potential. But these are going to be the names and lights for the next few years, definitely.
Alcaraz came through 3 5-setters before the final, which is it's great for prime time, everybody getting to know him. It's good for the brand. If any, it's an amazing way to win, to come through those. Yeah, to have those tough matches definitely shows his character, and his grit and his strength, his resilience to win 3 back-to-back 5-setters. And he played all of his matches on ash, on that centre court, and he played under the lights as well. So he was playing his last match against TFO until 3 o'clock in the morning or something, and then had to try and recover with the day only between that and the final. I mean, he's something else, this guy. He's a special player. It's like the sport knew that they needed to turn him into a superstar, so they're like, look, we're just going to make sure that you're scheduled for the peak viewing hours. Well, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning isn't peak viewing hours. Everybody giving up on it at that stage. But what is it about his game that makes him so set for the hard courts? What is his talent set compared to kind of some of the other greats? Well, just his game in general on any surface. But it's hard to fault him. He's got this sheer power that he can play with his forehand and his serve. He can really just create this amazing racket head speed through his shots. His backhand is very solid. Comparing him to Ruud last night in the final, he was much more solid off the backhand side than Ruud. He's able to play with drop shots. He serves in volleys. He serves in volleys at the most random times. It's amazing that he has this his tactical awareness. Unlike any other player that we've seen, he kind of can compare him a little bit more to Roger Federer as opposed to Nadal, even though he is Spanish. Right. On the hard court, the way it suits his game, because he can be a little bit more aggressive, and he plays very aggressively, and he doesn't let his opponents in. He's up on top of that baseline, playing real aggressive game style. And where does the game evolve for him then? Because obviously, we look back at the 19-year-olds. We were talking earlier. Sampras, similar age when he won, but the 19-year-old Rafa versus the 30-year-old Rafa, or even the 19-year-old Roger Federer versus the 27-year-old Federer. So there's much more still to come. Yeah, his coach Juan Carlos Ferrer was saying that he feels like he's only at 60% of his ability at the moment. So that's kind of a scary thought. He's only 19. He's already the world number one, and he's won a Grand Slam. What is the future going to hold for him? I think in looking at his game overall, he needs to improve a little bit his return of serve. I think his serve in general could actually improve as well. He plays kind of percentage serve, so he doesn't go for the lines as much or go for as much power as you might see some of the other players. He uses the body serve very effectively because he can back that up with his massive forehand. And I think, his kind of maturity on the court, tactically, he could improve and structure his points a little bit better, because he can't always be that showman and play those 5-set matches. That's just not going to be. Well, I was going to say, the athleticism is obviously there as well at the moment, that allows him to do that. So what kind of a challenge did Ruud put up for him? Not really a huge one. I thought, if you look at the sets, the first set, he wasn't really challenged at all, Alcaraz, by Ruud. He broke serve relatively early on, then just held his serve quite easily. He kind of had a bit of a blip in the second set, Alcaraz. He switched off mentally. He looked maybe a little bit tired, as we mentioned. He played 3 5-set matches late into the night, and that kind of showed in that second set, but he got it back together in the third. Ruud has chances in the third set. He had 2-set points, so it could have been a different match, but I think Alcaraz always had it in him that he was going to win this match, and it looked like he was the likely winner the whole time. We were also talking about this a bit earlier on about the Wimbledon situation, and neither of these two, Świątek or Alcaraz, were super competitive. I think Alcaraz was okay in the early rounds, but never quite reached the situation where we thought he was going to win it. Was there anything behind that? Was it just they're better hardcore players at the moment in their careers? Well, the grass is always a tricky transition for the players. Coming from clay court onto the grass court, it's always very different. It plays a lot faster than a clay court does. The points are a lot quicker. Alcaraz just couldn't get his footing right. It seemed his footwork right, and that's such a big part of his game. He moves unbelievably well. He's probably one of the best movers in the game. And as you mentioned, athleticism, it just didn't come to form in Wimbledon. And then Świątek,
she didn't have a great Wimbledon either. Again, she was saying that the surface was a bit of an issue for her, and she's an amazing mover. She wasn't able to get into the match with her footwork and into position that she needed to. I think on the hard court though, that transition, Alcaraz definitely suits the hard court even more than Świątek's game does, whereas Świątek is definitely more of a clay court kind of a player, where she likes to build up the points and then takes her time and then pulls the trigger and goes for the winner, whereas Alcaraz plays hot tennis from the very first shot of the rally.
For just a question about Ruud, for what does he need to do now? Because obviously we've seen him in 2 Grand Slam finals, both of them not been all that impressive, and it seems to be he goes on a run, gets to that point, and then just slips off. Is it an experience thing? Is it a mentality thing? Or is it just that his game isn't at the same level as some of the other players?
Yeah, tough 2 losses for him this year. I mean, the first one against Nadal, nobody had Ruud as the favourite, whereas last night he went into that match, we could say 50-50, the chances for him to win it. He had been there before, so he had the experience there, but I think it's his game maybe faltered a little bit in those 2 finals, especially looking at last night's one. His backhand let him down a little bit. He wasn't serving as well as he could. Like in the first set, he had less than 50% for a serve, which is really poor in the men's side. Like they need to be serving well and up in the 70s, to be holding serve. So I think there may be, and not necessarily a belief. I don't think it's necessarily a belief, because he really did think he was going to win that last night. So I think it does come back to his game and the way he structures, the way he tactically his points, trying to play on that forehand a lot becomes very predictable for players. So players are able to read how he's going to play. I think they're going to have to go back to the drawing room and improve a few things, as I mentioned, the backhand and his serve as well.
So who is most likely to emerge from that group to be Alcaraz's main challenger over the next while? It doesn't sound like you think Ruud is ahead of, say, is it Sinner or any of those other guys?
I think, yeah, like the likes of Sinner and Rublev, if they make a few adjustments to their games, they could be, and Zverev, as we know him, and Thiem, who's injured at the moment. Like those guys, we've been talking about them as being the next gen, and then Alcaraz just came kind of out of nowhere last year, and he's now the next hot shot. I think, yeah, some of the guys are going to have to adjust their games to play against the likes of Alcaraz, because Alcaraz can just do anything from anywhere on the court.
So it does sound like you think he can be competitive on grass at Wimbledon. It just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, definitely. I think he'd only played like 3 matches or 3 tournaments on grass ever before Wimbledon this year. So I think he just needs experience. I mean, as we said, he's only 19. But also on that note, I'd love to see Djokovic and Alcaraz playing over the next 2 or 3 years, when Djokovic, if he gets back to playing the tournament.
Is he going to be able to play Australia?
Not based on that. This year is... And
maybe not America next year either. So it's literally only France and Wimbledon.
Yeah, and then even at the Masters tournaments and whatnot, I'd love to see them competing, because I think that's going to give Djokovic a bit of fire in his belly, like that he's not done yet, and Alcaraz is the next up and coming. So there'll be some spicy matches, I think. And
Nadal's injuries, we were chatting about this too earlier. If, like, you would expect, if he is going to be competitive, it'll be in Australia, and then really it'll be in Paris next year. Yeah, I reckon he's going to have a layoff now for the winter season, and maybe not compete too much in the hard court this kind of time, up and coming time, and leave his competitive matches until Australia. And as you said, the French Open, I think with the injuries he's had, and his wife's expecting a baby, his priorities may shift over the coming months, years. So hopefully this is not the end for Nadal, but I still think he'll remain competitive, but he just won't be featuring a huge amount. Okay, what kind of a tournament did Świątek have? I'm just looking here. She dropped a couple of sets, but was never really in danger of losing any matches. She had a very kind of ropey start to the US Open. She came in with not great form. I think her best result since winning the French Open in May was a quarter-final. So she hasn't got much form coming into the US Open, and she didn't look comfortable, I felt, in the first few rounds in the US Open. She doesn't really like New York. She was saying that she doesn't like the noise and the buzz that it creates there. She was giving out about the balls. What?
I know. Yeah, the men and women play with different balls.
That's crazy. That does sound ridiculous.
That is, yeah, that's crazy. But so she was kind of giving out about that. But she played 2 tournaments before the US Open to get used to that. So I mean, that shouldn't really be an issue, other than the bigger issue of them playing with different balls. And then she got challenged. She had, like I said, 2-3 set matches coming into this final. Her semi-final, she was challenged by Sabalenka. She was 4-2 down in the 3rd set.
Okay, right.
So she turned that one around, which was a big deal. And also she came from the 2 matches she was in 3 sets. She lost lost the first set. It's a great sign of a champion that she's able to figure it out and find a way to win those matches. And we saw her play her best match, I think, in the final against Jabeur. She just was a different player to the player we saw for the previous 2 weeks, playing very aggressively from the very get-go. Like, she won the first 3 games in 8 minutes. It's just phenomenal stuff. But amazing for her to be able to win, having not played her best throughout the tournament.
So the ceiling for her with the 3 Grand Slams won at the age of 21 is obviously, anything is possible. She could go on and dominate the sport. But we've also seen people who get that successful early struggle a little bit over the last number of years. In particular, is that because the pressure to be the next Serena is so great? Like, we were trying to speculate earlier on about how the 3 lads together seem to drive each other on.
Yeah.
Whereas it seems to have been kind of, everybody's been slightly under the shadow of Serena in the women's game. So you reach a high, you get put up on a pedestal, and then it's very difficult to maintain that. I mean, these are obviously pop psychology theories here. Yeah. So either indulge them or shoot them down. Yeah,
well, I think with Świątek, she has shown that she is dominant as the world number 1. She's backed up a Grand Slam win this year, which, that is a sign of a champion. And that's the first time that's happened in the last 6 years in the women's game. So you can see there's been such a topsy-turvy sign in the women's game over the last few years since Williams has kind of not been dominating. I think it's going to take a few years, and it has obviously in the last few years taken a few years for us to get that champion. I think Świątek is going to be that, and she's going to remain in that pole position. She's not going to be challenged. I don't think she's going to be challenged a huge amount next year. Maybe by Jabeur, maybe by Rybakina, who won Wimbledon this year. Those hard hitters, but she's able to play against any game style, so she's able to figure it out in the moment. And it's something that she alluded to in her press conferences during the tournament, was that she felt like she was very proud of herself because she was able to work it out on the match court against the different game styles, and when she had her back against the wall. So she's really showing her dominance, I think, this year by backing that up.
In terms of the footwork that you were talking about a little bit earlier on around Wimbledon, is that teachable? I mean, obviously it's teachable, but how teachable is it, I guess?
The footwork for her in general?
No, just specifically the things that she needs to get better at to be someone who could maybe do a Grand Slam.
The calendar slam. Yeah, that's just more time on the grass court. I think she didn't, after the French Open last year, she didn't play in any tournament before Wimbledon, so she had no practice.
Right.
So it's going to just take some time, playing some of those run-up tournaments before Wimbledon, or just getting a little bit more time on the grass.
And is that like sitting down at the start of the year and mapping out your course and deciding actually something ridiculous like trying to do the calendar slam? I can do that now because I'm she has that. Like, she has the. Is there a freedom that comes from being as successful as she is now at this age that will allow her to maybe not just show up at random tournament to win it for whatever, points or any of that kind of stuff?
Well, there's always going to be the expectation that she's going to put on herself, but also that others will put on herself, being the world number 1, that she's going to turn up and win those tournaments. But yeah, they normally lay out their tournament schedule at the start of the year, and if she thinks she could win the calendar slam, will try and pick the tournaments, pick and choose, basically.
Yeah,
because
it seems like an oversight now, in retrospect, not to have played at Eastbourne or somewhere before Wimbledon.
Birmingham, yeah. Now that we look back, hindsight, but looking forward, if she wants to win Wimbledon, she may have to play on those tournaments, like as you mentioned, Bournemouth or Birmingham, those tournaments that are before Wimbledon, just to get a bit more time. But then if she wins the French Open, those tournaments are straight after that. So there's that question of, do we take a bit of time off, or do you go straight into that grass court season?
Yeah. And look, maybe it's ridiculous. Maybe she'll win 2 majors every year, and one of them won't be Wimbledon, and she'll have an amazing career at the end where she looks back and goes, I won 20 majors,
I still think she'll win in Wimbledon. I think her dominance is there to win all 4 on any surface. She can play on any surface. We all in the beginning were saying, she had this amazing match streak on clay courts, but then could she convert that to the hard courts, which plays much faster? And she just shown she can. So in Australia is on hard court as well, so it'll be interesting to see who's going to put it up to her in Australia.
What's the rest of the season like for these guys now? Is it
there's a bit of a layoff now, and then they go into the winter indoor hard court season, and then they have the final championships at the end of the year where the top 8 players come together and play against each other. So we'll see then who ends up as the number
That's
one.
basically a money fight, right?
Completely, yeah. Yeah.
I often wonder, as an aficionado, as someone who understands the level of tennis being played, do they reach the same levels in those competitions as they do in the majors? Are they playing as well?
It's always hard to compare to the Grand Slams, because that is where it's at, and that's what you're remembered for as a tennis player, is the Grand Slam wins. And you've seen over the years like players winning those end of year tournaments and nobody really remembers them for it. Yeah, as you said, it's almost a little bit more exhibition like, those tournaments, as opposed to the Grand Slams, which is, as I said, where it really counts.
Yeah.
So you
do they hit the ball as hard?
They still go out and play.
Do they chase it down as hard?
Of course they do. Like, I mean, yeah, that's in you as an athlete to win. You know, that will to win, you can't turn that off. But there may be even more trick shots played and whatnot. Yeah. I'm saying that, but that's not necessarily the case. They all want to win. There's a lot of money on the line.
Yeah. So the motivation is similar, and the standard is the same, so we should tune in.
Yes, absolutely, definitely, yes.
All right, well, that makes sense. So all in all, not a bad tennis season.
No, we've seen a lot of highs and lows. And the guard is changing in the men's game now, so it's exciting for the future of tennis.
Yeah, well, because if you think about like the last 2 weeks in the build-up were completely overshadowed by the fact that in Vogue, Serena was like, "Okay, I'm done officially, it's over," and now it's kind of like, well, okay, fair enough. We kind of knew you were finished anyway.
Yeah,
so
that was it.
Yeah, and if none of the other three in the men's were to ever win a Grand Slam again, we've had a good time.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of
say goodbye to them too.
Would you think so?
I think so, yeah.
I don't think it's the end though.
Well, I'd love to see Alcaraz smash Djokovic a couple of times over the next couple of years.
So would I.
There you go. I think we'd all pay for that.
Yeah.
On that note, Jenny, thanks very much.
Thank you, guys.
It's some tennis from Jenny Claffey there this